"Hey Grandpa, you lost?" The voice came sharp, mocking, just as Elias Tanner, Red, to those who knew, rounded the corner by the fast food place on Ashland Avenue. The sun sat low, casting long shadows from the cluster of teens loitering outside the burger joint, their phones out, laughter bubbling just beneath the surface. Red, leaning slightly on his cane, didn't look at them as he passed. He didn't need to. The tone told him everything. One of them stepped into his path. "Old man, this is a youth zone," another said, grinning. Red paused. "Excuse me," he said plainly, calm, like he was asking someone to pass the salt. But it only encouraged them. A foot shot out. Red's body pitched forward with the sudden shove, more balance stolen than full force. His cane flew from his grasp, skittering across the sidewalk. His torso twisted, hand flailing at the empty air. Gravity didn't give him a second chance. He landed hard, ribs slamming into the concrete's edge just short of the road. A horn blared. A car screeched to a halt, the driver gesturing angrily from behind the wheel. The teens erupted in wild, cruel laughter. "Man, did you see his face?" one shouted, high-fiving another. "He almost ate a bumper." Red didn't move for a moment. Not because he was stunned, but because he was measuring. He pushed himself up slowly, face unreadable. Knees protesting. Bones remembering. He retrieved his cane, brushing gravel from his sleeve. One of the teens mimed a limp and snorted. "You okay, Pops? You break a hip?" Red didn't look back. Didn't answer. He just nodded faintly, almost to himself, and walked on. But his eyes, steel blue and unblinking, held none of the confusion or fear they expected. What they saw was a man not shaken, but settled. Cold. Calm. Like someone who'd already lived through fire. And was now only considering when to light a match. His name is Elias Tanner, but everyone called him Red. Not because of politics or temper, though folks often guessed that, but for the auburn crew cut he kept sharp through most of his service, and the crimson bandana he always tied to his belt. He'd worn it since his first combat drop in Vietnam, a habit that stuck like the nickname. Red was a pararescueman in the United States Air Force, one of the elite PJs. He wasn't a man who boasted, but his record whispered louder than most men's shouting. In '69, he dropped into enemy jungle to rescue a pair of downed pilots, dragging them both out while machine gun fire shredded the brush around him. For that, he earned the Silver Star. When asked about it years later, all he said was, "I didn't pull them out for a medal. I pulled them out because they weren't dead yet." He stayed in. Red didn't know how to live without a mission. After Vietnam came peacekeeping in Kosovo, then humanitarian flights during the Gulf War, famine relief, medevac extractions, earthquake rescues. The missions changed, but his discipline didn't. When others buckled under chaos, Red found clarity. Eventually, he trained new recruits in the Air National Guard. Taught them how to stay calm in the worst minutes of someone else's life. Taught them not just how to save others, but how to walk away without breaking. When he retired, he didn't make noise. No press. No speeches. Just a quiet move to a modest second-story apartment in the old part of town. He picked it because it had a sturdy stairwell and windows that caught morning light. The unit was spare, bed, recliner, table, kitchenette. He kept things neat. Always had. His walls held reminders, black and white photos of men in flight gear, a shelf with faded patches, a shadow box with medals he never talked about. Some visitors asked about them. Red would nod once and say, "Just old things," then offer coffee and change the subject. There was no wife, no kids. Some assumed he must have had a family once, but Red never confirmed or denied. He had friends, men and women from service who called now and then, but no one close by. That didn't seem to trouble him. He had one ritual that mattered, Thursdays at the VFW on Walnut Street. Every week, he'd knot his red bandana to his belt, shrug into a worn bomber jacket, and walk 5 blocks to the hall. There, he drank coffee, swapped stories, sometimes sat in silence with others who'd seen too much. If someone brought pie, especially lemon, he'd crack a grin and say, "Now it's Thursday." People respected him. Not because he demanded it, but because of the way he carried himself. His back was no longer straight, and his steps had slowed, but when Red looked at you, you straightened up. His gaze still held weight. He still read the newspaper every morning. Still stood up when the anthem played on TV. Still kept a shortwave radio tuned to military bands, habit, not necessity. He said little, watched everything. But the city around him changed. It grew louder. Faster. Meaner. Sidewalks cracked, and no one fixed them. Music blared from passing cars. People bumped shoulders without apology. Teenagers yelled across streets, more interested in their own noise than the people near them. Trash blew through alleys. Red never liked change, but this wasn't just change, it was erosion. He especially noticed the group outside that fast food place on Ashland. Loud, sneering, always glued to their phones or harassing passers-by. Sometimes they'd make jokes about dinosaurs when he walked past. He ignored it. Until he couldn't. The day they shoved him, the day they laughed as he hit pavement, that was the shift. Red had fallen before. In worse places. Under worse circumstances. But this time felt different. Not because it hurt more, but because of the silence afterward. The absence of decency. No one tried to help him up. They laughed instead. That night, he sat in his recliner without turning on the light. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, the faraway sound of sirens, none of it registered. He just sat there, one hand on his cane, the other resting on the armrest. He wasn't angry. He was remembering. Remembering the principles drilled into him when he was a young man hauling wounded men through smoke and fire. Respect. Discipline. Integrity. Service. Words they'd lived by. And now? Just shadows of ideas, fading under neon lights and viral videos. He looked across the room at an old photo, 6 men in camo, Red among them, dust-covered and grinning beside a helicopter. The youngest in the group had been 19. Red hadn't been much older. The bandana was already tied to his belt in that picture. His eyes lingered on that image. He reached for his Bible, but didn't open it. Not yet. Because something had been stirred, not vengeance, but duty. He hadn't worn a uniform in decades. But some uniforms, he realized, never really come off. And some missions, some lessons, aren't finished just because the war ends. The following Thursday, Red Tanner prepared as always. Jacket zipped, crimson bandana tied. But this time, the motion of securing it around his belt loop brought a wince. His ribs still ached from the fall. Bruising, nothing broken. Still, it lingered. He breathed through it. The walk began as usual, slow but steady. His cane clicked against the pavement with a familiar rhythm. He noticed details others missed, the uneven concrete, broken glass in a gutter, a rusted bicycle chained to a post. These streets were once familiar. Now they felt foreign, impatient. The city wasn't what it used to be. He'd felt it shifting, gradually at first, then faster. People didn't nod to strangers anymore. Didn't hold doors or yield the sidewalk. Everyone stared down at screens or into space, ears plugged, hearts closed. Red turned onto Ashland Avenue. He saw them right away, teenagers, same as before, gathered in front of the burger joint. 7 of them today, maybe 8. Loud, laughing, riding the high of their own noise. One leaned against a wall, flipping a lighter open and shut. Another had a speaker thumping some beat Red didn't recognize. The sidewalk, already narrow from garbage bags piled near the curb, left him little room to maneuver. He kept his pace. As he approached, one boy nudged another. "Yo, it's Grandpa Airborne." Laughter rippled through the group. Red kept walking. "Excuse me," he said, voice calm. "Clear." He didn't stop moving. A tall kid in a black hoodie stepped sideways, blocking the path. "You got somewhere important to be, old man?" Red paused. His grip on the cane shifted slightly, but his voice didn't change. "Just passing through." Another teen chimed in. "You should fly, then. Use that cane like a broom." "Better yet," said the one with the speaker, "do a trick. Fall again. That was wild last time." More laughter. The speaker's volume rose. Red looked at them, faces young, eyes older than they should be. Angry, maybe. Or just empty. That was harder to fix. He moved to step around, but a leg shot out. Contact. Sudden. His foot caught. His weight shifted wrong. The ground rushed up. This time he didn't cry out. He hit hard on his side, rolled once, and lay still for a moment. His cane clattered away. A horn blared, someone had swerved again. A driver shouted something muffled by glass. More laughter followed. A voice imitated a siren. "Man down. Medic. Someone call a nurse. Shoulda brought his walker." Red sat up slowly. His breathing was short, but steady. Nothing broken, just bruised again. His knee throbbed. He ignored it. He reached for his cane. One of the boys kicked it farther down the sidewalk. Red looked up. His face was calm. Almost unreadable. He stood. He didn't speak. Didn't yell. Just turned and began walking away, limping slightly, but upright. Behind him, the laughter faded. One of the boys muttered, "Creepy how he just walks off like that." The rest stayed silent. Red walked 2 more blocks before stopping at a bench near the bus stop. He sat heavily. Adjusted the bandana. Rubbed his knee. He stared forward. People passed. No one looked down. After several minutes, a young woman finally paused. "Sir? Are you all right?" Red turned. Looked her in the eye. "I'm fine," he said simply. "But the city isn't." She blinked. Didn't know how to answer that. She left. He sat another minute, then stood and continued on. At the VFW, the usual crew was mid-conversation when he entered. May noticed him first. "Red." "I'm okay," he said before she finished. He took his coffee black, same as always, and sat near the window. Lenny leaned over. "Was it them again?" Red nodded once. "No police?" "No point." May frowned. "You should report it. Someone could have been seriously hurt." Red sipped his coffee. "They'll learn nothing from a fine." Joseph, quiet all morning, finally spoke. "You think they'll learn anything at all?" That sat heavy on the table. Red looked out the window. Rain was starting. Drops ran down the glass like threads. Cars hissed along the wet street. Across the way, a flag on a storefront flapped hard in the wind. He finally said, "They need to be told. Not yelled at. Taught." "Taught by who?" May asked. Red's reply was soft. "Someone who remembers what respect looks like." The rest of the table went quiet. No one argued. Because the truth was, Red had already decided. And that quiet, settled feeling in his chest. That wasn't defeat. It was purpose. The next morning, Red Tanner rose early. Pain shot through his knee as he stood, but he ignored it. He moved with slow precision through his apartment, each action deliberate. Coffee brewed, sunlight crept in through dusty blinds. The bruises from the previous day were deep and purpling, but they didn't matter. His thoughts were elsewhere. He sat at the small kitchen table, a leather-bound address book laid before him. The cover was cracked, its pages filled with old names and numbers. Most weren't reachable anymore. But one stood out, written in block letters with a black pen. Lieutenant Colonel Gabriel Alvarez, CAP District 14 Outpost. Red had met him 2 years earlier at a flag dedication ceremony. The man had saluted Red first, unprompted. That gesture had stuck with him. Some people wore their respect without needing a reason. He reached for the phone. After 2 rings, a voice answered, sharp and official. Civil Air Patrol, District 14. This is Elias Tanner. I'm looking for Lieutenant Colonel Alvarez. There was a pause. Please hold. Muffled voices passed in the background. Then a confident, even tone, Mr. Tanner? This is Alvarez. Red didn't bother with pleasantries. I need a favor. He told him everything. No drama, just facts. The alley. The boys. The trip. The laughter. The second fall. He didn't ask for sympathy. They weren't just mocking an old man, Red said. They were mocking what built this place. What gave them the right to laugh? Silence. Then Alvarez replied, what are you asking for? They need to be taught. Not by shouting. Not by punishment. But by example. Alvarez said, what time? Dusk. Click. Red hung up. He looked out the window, watching the wind stir the trees. The city felt smaller than it had once been, but in moments like this, it still breathed. That afternoon, Red didn't go to the VFW. He sat in the park instead, alone. From his bench, he could see the alley. The burger joint across the street was already crowded. The same boys loitered, loud and careless. He didn't glare. He didn't move. He waited. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, the air cooled. At exactly 7:03 p.m., 6 figures emerged at the corner. Cadets. Blue uniforms crisp. Shoes polished. Posture perfect. 4 boys, 2 girls. None older than 17. Behind them, walking like a man used to command, came Alvarez. His jacket bore his name, silver rank insignia catching the light. They crossed the street in silence. 2 cadets moved to either end of the alley. They didn't speak, just stood calmly, hands behind backs. Present but non-threatening. The teens inside the alley quieted as the group arrived. Alvarez walked straight in. No one said a word. When he reached the center of the alley, he stopped. Looked at each boy. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Alvarez, he said. I serve the United States Air Force Auxiliary. I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to remind you. The boys looked around, confused but quiet. You pushed down a veteran, Alvarez said. A man who once flew into firefights without weapons, pulling wounded soldiers from burning aircraft. They shuffled uneasily. You laughed when he fell. Twice. Alvarez paused. You're not in trouble. This isn't about punishment. This is about what you forgot, or never learned. Dignity doesn't vanish with age. Respect doesn't come with a badge. It's given to those who earned it. The cadets behind him remained silent. Their presence spoke for itself. Alvarez stepped aside, eyes scanning the group. He didn't raise a hand to you. Didn't curse. Didn't call the police. That takes more strength than any punch. One of the teens lowered his gaze. Another mumbled, "We didn't mean anything." Alvarez nodded. "Meaning doesn't excuse action. But you're here. That means there's still time to learn." Then he turned and walked away. The cadets followed without a word. Red watched from his bench. The boys stayed silent. One of them picked up an empty soda can from the ground and set it in a bin. No one laughed. No one spoke. When Alvarez reached the bench, Red stood. They shook hands. "No fists," Alvarez said. "Just presence." Red nodded. "Sometimes that's louder." Evening air settled cool over the city, dusting the rooftops in a haze of violet blue. For once, the alley was quiet. No bass thump from phone speakers, no trash can rattling with kicked bottles. Just a stillness that Red Tanner could feel deep in his bones. He sat at his bench again, same spot as the day before, one leg crossed over the other, cane resting upright beside him. His bruises hadn't faded, but they throbbed less. He didn't look for the teens this time. He looked for Alvarez. At exactly 6:58 p.m., they arrived, same formation, same silent cadence. Lieutenant Colonel Gabriel Alvarez led from the front, his uniform jacket pressed tight, ribbons neatly aligned. The 6 cadets followed close, every step practiced. Their eyes never wavered. They'd done drills before, but tonight wasn't practice. It was real. The alley was already occupied, 5 teens clustered at the center, same boys who'd shoved Red days earlier. They laughed less tonight. Their postures, looser than the day before, grew rigid as the cadets came into view. One of them, the tallest, stepped forward as if to intercept. Alvarez didn't stop. He walked directly into their space, the way a pilot would stride into a hangar before dawn. The teens instinctively stepped back. He didn't raise his voice. "Evening," Alvarez said, tone level. No reply. He turned, gesturing to his cadets. "These 6 are future leaders. They've pledged time and effort to learn respect, through action, not just words." He nodded toward the teens. "I asked them to come here tonight for a reason. Not to confront you. To bear witness." Still silence. "You see, it's easy to trip a man who walks slow. Easy to laugh when no one challenges you. But easy doesn't build anything. It doesn't demand anything of you. And it certainly doesn't teach you who you are." His voice echoed faintly off the brick walls. "I was your age once. We all were. Mistakes are part of the deal. But disrespect? That's not a mistake. It's a decision." The tall teen opened his mouth, paused, then closed it again. "You don't know Elias Tanner," Alvarez continued. "But I do. He served as a pararescueman in Vietnam. That means when a pilot crashed under fire, Red flew in after them. Not with guns. With bandages. And faith." He gestured subtly toward Red across the street. The teens looked. Red didn't wave. Didn't nod. Just sat still, watching. Alvarez went on. He pulled airmen from wreckage under enemy fire. Dragged men missing limbs to safety. Some of them made it home. Some didn't. But every one of them got a shot because of him. One of the boys shifted uncomfortably. He didn't brag about it. Didn't ask for attention. He lived quietly. Carried himself with grace. That's dignity. He paused again. "And the other day, you mocked him. Shoved him. Watched him fall. That's on you." Now the group shifted collectively. Not defiance, something more uncertain. "But here's the truth," Alvarez said. "You're not villains. You're just misdirected." He raised his hand, slowly gesturing at the cadets. "You want to know what strength looks like? It's here. In their stillness. In their silence. In how they carry the weight of respect without demanding anything in return. He took a breath. I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm asking you to think. Then he looked each one in the eye. Red Tanner didn't call the cops. Didn't curse your names. He made one call, to me. And do you know why? The smallest teen, a kid with a buzz cut and too big hoodie, finally spoke. Because, he wanted to show us? No, Alvarez said, soft now. Because he believed you were worth the effort. That hit like a quiet bell. None of the teens responded. But none of them walked away either. Then something unexpected happened. The tall boy, whose sneaker had tripped Red days ago, pulled off his baseball cap. He looked at it a moment. His hands fidgeted like he was holding something heavier than cloth. Then, in a deliberate motion, he stepped forward and set the cap down at the center of the alley. The gesture was small. But unmistakable. Alvarez nodded. You made a start. He turned to his cadets. Dismissed. The 6 saluted, then began moving, 2 heading back down the block, 2 remaining at the alley ends, and 2 crossing toward Red's bench. The teens didn't run. They stayed put, unsure of what to do next. No one had yelled. No threats had been made. But the pressure they felt, of legacy, of presence, was real. The 2 cadets who crossed the street approached Red with practiced, steady steps. One girl, maybe 16, extended a folded sheet of paper. For you, sir, she said. From our squadron. Red opened it. Inside was a single quote. Respect is not demanded. It is demonstrated. Under it were 6 signatures. Neatly printed. He looked up at them, eyes a little wetter than usual. Thank you, he said simply. The girl nodded. We're honored, sir. Red watched as they returned to their unit. He rose, slowly, and walked to the corner of the alley. The tall teen was still there, staring at the cap he'd placed. Red didn't speak. He simply reached down, picked up the cap, and handed it back. The teen looked stunned. Red locked eyes with him. Don't trip another man for walking slow. One day, you'll walk like this too. The boy took the cap. I'm sorry. Red just gave him a nod. No smile. Just quiet acknowledgement. Alvarez joined him at the alley's edge. They'll remember this. They'd better, Red replied. That was a damn fine demonstration. Alvarez smiled slightly. Didn't raise a fist. Didn't shout. Didn't need to. Red turned. The streetlights flicked on overhead. Somewhere, a siren wailed in the distance, but in this moment, this alley, the world was still. As the cadets regrouped, and the teens slowly drifted apart in silence, Red stood there, taller than before, the weight of memory no longer pressing him down, but lifting him. The days passed, and summer inched forward. Red Tanner resumed his Thursday walks, cane tapping the sidewalk with rhythmic resolve. The bruises faded, though a faint blue shadow still clung to his jaw like an old scar reluctant to disappear. He didn't mind. Scars told stories, and Red had always preferred stories that took time to earn. Something had changed in the city. Not in sweeping, cinematic ways, but in quiet shifts, like the hush that follows a powerful note. Red could feel it in how people glanced his way a little longer, or how some nodded respectfully as he passed. He wasn't looking for recognition, but it came all the same, in the eyes of strangers who seemed, somehow, to see him more clearly. At the corner where he had fallen, the fast food place still buzzed with teenagers, music, and noise. But the alley beside it had grown, quieter. Something lingered in the air there, not tension, but memory. One Thursday afternoon, just before his usual stop at the VFW hall, Red paused by that alley. There, mounted to the brick wall just above eye level, was a new plaque. Bronze. Unpolished, but deliberate. The inscription read, "Respect the ones who walk slow. They once moved faster than you can imagine." Red stared at it for a long time. There was no signature. No note of who had put it there. But he had his suspicions. Alvarez, perhaps. Or one of the cadets. Maybe even one of the teens. He reached out, fingers brushing the metal. It was warm from the sun, solid beneath his fingertips. A voice beside him said, "You see it?" Red turned. It was the small cadet, the one who had handed him the quote days earlier. Her uniform was replaced with civilian clothes now, but she still stood like she wore a mission on her shoulders. "I did," Red said. She smiled. "Alvarez said it should be anonymous. That it's better that way." Red nodded. "He's right. I think one of the boys helped hang it," she added. "The tall one. Brought the ladder himself." Red raised an eyebrow. "He did?" She nodded. "Told us he figured it was time he did something that stayed up instead of knocking things down." Red chuckled, soft and warm. The cadet looked at him a moment longer. "Sir, you know you changed something, right? You didn't have to do anything loud. You just stood there. That meant something." Red glanced back at the plaque. "I didn't change anything," he said. "I just reminded them what they already knew." The girl nodded solemnly. "We still talk about it. At the outpost. Lieutenant Colonel Alvarez called it a civil exercise in dignity. Said it was more effective than any drill we've done." Red smirked. He always did have a way with words. She extended her hand. "Thank you, sir." He shook it. "You're welcome, cadet." She hesitated. "Actually, I'm not in Civil Air Patrol anymore. I turned 18. Headed to basic training next month. Air Force." Red's eyebrows lifted, genuinely impressed. "You're enlisting?" "Yes, sir." "You'll do fine." She beamed, pride unmistakable. "That's the plan." They parted ways quietly. She disappeared around the corner, and Red stood a moment longer in front of the plaque. Then he turned and continued toward the VFW.